The real cavity is not in your tooth. They say the real cavity is not in your tooth. It lies in a system that, more than once, seems designed so that pain lasts just long enough, and the cure arrives only when it is convenient. Because medicine, and dentistry in particular, do not always move at the pace of what is possible, but at the pace of what is profitable. But before we understand why a simple little hole in a tooth can move billions of dollars, we need to look back. Since the beginning of time, humanity has searched for ways to heal, sometimes in the kitchen, sometimes in the fields, other times in temples or laboratories. The truth is that every generation left its mark, a remedy, a custom, a discovery. Some worked, others did not, but all had something in common: the need to understand and relieve pain. And in that search, which begins intimate and familiar, we find the origin of what we now call medicine. What we are about to see is not a story of magical formulas or secret potions. It is rather the journey of how that knowledge passed from the hands of the people to the hands of industry. Grandmother's remedies. Magic, myth, and medicine. Since ancient times, humanity has clung to home remedies, tricks passed down from generation to generation. An herbal infusion for stomach pain, a clove to calm a toothache, a pumpkin seed against parasites. For centuries, those remedies were all there was. Many called them old wives' tales. But today we know that more than one of those recipes concealed a real active principle. The problem is that this popular knowledge was not always well regarded. In the Middle Ages, women and men who practiced with herbs were accused of witchcraft and ended up at the stake. What once was wisdom whispered from mouth to ear became a threat to power. And yet almost everything we now call modern pharmacology comes to a greater or lesser extent from that legacy. From garlic to willow, from wormwood to aloe vera. What once was found in the kitchen, today is sold in the pharmacy. The difference is that now it carries a label and a price. From the kitchen to the pharmacy. If we talk about the roots of pharmacology, we must talk about Galen, a Greek physician of the 2nd century after Christ. Galen observed something fundamental. Nature's remedies could be preserved, combined, and dosed. It was not necessary to eat 60 artichokes a day to improve the liver. It was enough to dry the plant, grind it, and administer it in the right amount. That idea, as simple as it was revolutionary, is the seed of what we know today as the pill. Galen did not despise popular knowledge. On the contrary, he gathered it, analyzed it, and turned it into method. Thus, what once was intuition began to transform into science. The same logic was seen in thermal waters. Ordinary people discovered that bathing in certain springs relieved pain. Then the aristocrats arrived, privatized the baths, and turned them into a luxury for the few. A logic that repeats itself time and again. What begins as popular knowledge ends up becoming business. That logic of Galen is still alive today. What yesterday was grandmother's remedy, today appears in a package with a barcode. Willow bark, used by Egyptians and Greeks against pain, gave birth to aspirin. The poppy, known for centuries, is the basis of morphine and codeine. The foxglove, used by Native Americans, gave us digoxin for the heart. Cinchona bark in Peru became quinine, the first great weapon against malaria. Sweet wormwood, registered in Chinese recipes, led to artemisinin, which still saves millions of lives. And there are also closer examples. Pumpkin seeds against intestinal parasites. Mulberry leaves in infusion to reduce blood sugar, today turned into diabetes medication. Clove, once an improvised dental pain reliever, today turned into a local anesthetic in pharmacies. The pattern is clear. What begins in tradition ends in industry. Popular knowledge is absorbed, validated, and finally sold. The true price of cavities. Tooth decay is not an inevitable destiny. It is not that a tooth simply rots on its own. It is an infection. Bacteria colonize the mouth, feed on sugars, and produce acids that erode the enamel until they open a hole. It rarely kills, but it wears down life, the smile, and above all, the wallet. For decades, ways have been sought to stop it before it begins. Experimental vaccines, topical antibodies, enzymes that break down the bacterial film, probiotics that compete for the same space, toothpastes that not only cleaned but tried to shut down the bacterial party. Some results were promising, but none became a master key accessible to all. Why? Because a biofilm is like an entire neighborhood of bacteria, not just one bug. Because there are ethical questions. Who gets vaccinated, when, and for how long? Because in public health, a disease that rarely kills always stays behind more urgent priorities. And because, in the end, there is an elephant in the room. If one day a cheap and effective prophylaxis against cavities appears, the global dental business turns upside down. And here is where the numbers speak louder than any theory. In the United States, a simple filling can cost up to $600. In Mexico, the same work can range from $30 to $160, depending on the city and the clinic. In Spain, it ranges between 50 and 150 euros. And in Malaysia, an amalgam filling costs less than $30. Even the aesthetic ones rarely exceed $80. The same little hole in a tooth can cost $20 in one place and $600 in another. And we're not talking about gold or diamonds. We're talking about a simple filling. What makes it so expensive in one place and so cheap in another? It is not science. It is the economy. 30 billion for a little hole in a tooth. If the numbers already seemed uncomfortable, imagine what would happen if one day cavities stopped being an everyday thing. Fewer fillings, fewer crowns, fewer root canals. And with that, fall the sales of resins, cements, burrs, anesthetics, and everything that keeps a dental clinic running. Prosthetic labs would make fewer dentures and fewer bridges. Manufacturers of chairs and scanners would sell less at their usual pace, and suddenly the whole machine would start to creak. For dentists, the routine would change. They would stop being firefighters putting out fires to become architects of smiles. Less repair, more prevention, more aesthetics. It is not that they would be left without work, but the business would shrink. And no one in their right mind invests thousands of dollars in training to be left with half an empty clinic. The industry is no stranger either. According to market reports, the global dental industry moves more than $500 billion a year. Only the segment of dental restorations represents more than 30 billion annually. And beware, it is not necessary to imagine cavities disappearing completely. Let's put it in numbers. If a safe prophylaxis reduced cavities by 20% in 2 decades, that would be 6 billion less each year. With a 40% reduction, we are talking about 12 billion less. And with 60% fewer cavities, the blow would be $18 billion annually. To better visualize it, with those $30 billion spent today on plugging teeth, you could buy almost 500,000 kilos of gold in bars, 500,000 kilos shining in a row, all just to grasp the size of the business generated by a little hole in a tooth. Or seen another way, according to calculations by the World Food Programme, with that money you could fund 60 billion school meals. That equals feeding, every day for an entire year, more than 160 million children. And here comes the irony. An effective vaccine or antibacterial would be a blessing for health, but an earthquake for the sector's economy. Of course there would be winners. Those who invest in prevention would grow. Sealants, probiotics, smart toothpastes, home diagnostics, food education. We, the patients, would win. Public health systems would win, spending much less on treatments. But the uncomfortable point remains. Today, the wheel spins with cavities as fuel. Take away that gasoline, and the entire engine of the dental business has to be rebuilt from scratch. And in that rebuilding, the question is brutal. Who will push so that the cure reaches everyone? And who will hold it back so that the business does not collapse overnight? Epilogue. The history of medicine is full of ironies. What yesterday was considered witchcraft, today is pharmacology. What was once shared in a grandmother's kitchen, today is sold in a blister pack with a prescription. And what seems like common sense, preventing before curing, often crashes into an invisible wall, the wall of money. We are not talking about a conspiracy of dentists with capes and masks. We are talking about something subtler, and at the same time more brutal. Incentives. If your salary, your clinic, your machines, and your future depend on people continuing to have cavities, how quickly are you going to applaud the arrival of a cure? Maybe the vaccine already exists, maybe it only needs to be developed, or maybe it will never arrive, because it is not profitable for it to arrive. And here remains the question for you, watching on the other side of the screen. Are the medicines we have today really the ones we need, or only the ones that are economically convenient? Because if grandmother's remedies, the Roman thermal baths, and the history of Galen teach us anything, it is that knowledge was always there, within people's reach. The difference is who administers it, who regulates it, and above all, who charges for it. In the end, it is not the cavity, nor the bacteria. It is the system that decides what to cure, what to delay, and what to hide. And that is the real cavity that corrodes in silence. If you enjoyed this story, leave your thoughts in the comments. Tell me what you think about this new world of invisible currencies and their silicon gods. And if you want to keep exploring more stories like this, subscribe to the channel, turn on the bell, and help this community keep growing. See you in the next chapter.